Dust billowed across the parched borderlands as Sarah Blackwood urged her horse forward, the last of her father's trading caravan disappearing behind the red canyon walls. The Apache territories stretched before her, a forbidden expanse few white settlers returned from. Her father's last words echoed in her mind. Sometimes the greatest risk brings the greatest reward. When the bandits struck, she thought death certain, until arrows rained from the cliffs above. He emerged like a spirit, this warrior with eyes that held both mistrust and honor. Two people from worlds at war, now bound by circumstance in a land that forgave no weakness. Could an Apache warrior and a trader's daughter overcome generations of bloodshed to find something neither expected? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wooden floors of Blackwood Trading Post creaked under Sarah's determined stride as she moved between shelves stacked with goods awaiting hopeful customers. Dust motes danced in the morning, light streaming through the windows, illuminating a space that had once bustled with activity but now stood mostly empty. She ran her fingers along the worn counter where her father had taught her to count change when she was barely tall enough to see over it. The silver compass in her pocket, her father's gift on her 16th birthday, pressed against her thigh. "To help you find your own way," he told her, though they both knew Sarah Blackwood rarely needed help finding direction. If anything, William Blackwood had spent most of his daughter's 22 years trying to rein in her headstrong nature. Sarah pulled the compass out, watching the needle quiver before settling north. Unlike most young women in the Arizona Territory of 1873, she'd learned to navigate by stars, track game, and drive hard bargains alongside the men who worked her father's trading caravans. Her mother, Elizabeth, had died of fever when Sarah was 12, leaving behind a collection of books on botany and a daughter who refused to be constrained by convention. "Sarah?" Her father's voice, once booming enough to command respect from the roughest frontiersmen, now came as a raspy whisper from the back room. "Is someone here?" "No, Pa." She tucked the compass away and moved toward his voice. "Just me checking." Inventory again. William Blackwood sat propped up in his bed, papers scattered across the quilt her mother had made. At 58, illness had withered his once robust frame, but his eyes remained sharp as he watched his daughter enter. "We've been over those numbers 3 times," he said. "They won't change, no matter how many times you count." Sarah poured water from a pitcher into a cup and helped him drink. "I thought maybe I missed something." "You never miss anything." He managed a weak smile. "That's why I'm still breathing." Since his coughing sickness had worsened 3 months ago, Sarah had taken over most aspects of the business. The doctor from Tucson had prescribed rest and expensive medicine that barely seemed to help. Meanwhile, their situation grew more precarious. "By the day, Jenkins came by while you were sleeping," she said, straightening his pillows. "The army's changed their supply route again. They're not coming through here anymore." William closed his eyes briefly. "That's the 3rd customer this month." The Stewart brothers also cancelled their order, with the Comanche raids further east. They're not risking the journey. "And the miners?" Sarah shook her head. "The new settlement at Copper Creek is getting supplies from Fort Bowie now, shorter route for them. The trading post had thrived for 15 years at this crossroads between established territories and the wilderness beyond. But as rail lines expanded elsewhere and military presence shifted, their once strategic location had become increasingly isolated. William picked up one of the papers, a ledger showing columns of red figures. "How long?" 3 months, Sarah answered honestly. "Maybe 4 if we cut back further. We've already cut to the bone." "I know." They sat in silence, the weight of impending ruin hanging between them. The trading post wasn't just their livelihood, it was their home, the culmination of William's life's work after leaving Philadelphia as a young man with dreams of the frontier. "We could sell," William suggested, not for the first time. "Move to Tucson. I have an old friend there who—" "No," Sarah's voice was firm. "This is our home, and you're not well enough to travel that distance." "Then what do you propose?" Sarah took a deep breath. She'd been formulating a plan for weeks, but had hesitated to share it, knowing her father's likely reaction. "The Apache," she said simply. William's eyes widened. "What about them?" "They control the territories to the south, territories with resources no other traders can access." "For good reason," William countered. "The Apache aren't exactly welcoming to outsiders, especially not white ones." Sarah pulled out a worn map from her pocket and spread it on the bed. "Look here. The Chiricahua bands move between these mountains. They trade with Mexican villages. Sometimes they have access to silver, unique herbs, hides from animals that don't range in settled territories. Sarah, and they need things too. Tools, cloth, medicine, things we could provide." William shook his head. "It's too dangerous. The military has standing orders." "The military isn't helping us survive," Sarah interrupted. "And we've always— The trade builds bridges where armies can't." "Theory and practice are different things, daughter." Sarah stood and paced the small room. "Do you remember Miguel, the Mexican guide who worked with us 3 summers ago? The one who spoke some Apache dialects?" "Yes. He told me the eastern bands sometimes sent representatives to border towns for trade. Their chief, or leader of some kind, was known to be more moderate than others." William studied his daughter, recognizing the determined set of her jaw. It was the same expression Elizabeth had worn when she'd decided something was worth fighting for. Even if what Miguel said is true, you can't just ride into Apache territory and expect to be welcomed with open arms. "I don't expect that," Sarah said, "but I speak some Spanish, as do many of their scouts who deal with Mexican villages. I know trading protocols from a dozen different tribes, and I'm not going in representing the U.S. government or the army, just our family business." "It's suicide," William said flatly. "It's our only chance." Sarah knelt beside the bed. "Pa, you've spent your life building relationships through fair trade. You taught me that commerce can bring understanding where nothing else can. Let me try." William looked at his daughter, at the strength and intelligence that reminded him so much of her mother. He'd raised her to be independent, capable, unafraid of the wilderness that surrounded them, perhaps too well. "The next caravan heading south leaves tomorrow," Sarah continued. "Parker's group. They're going as far as the southern ridge, the edge of contested territory. I could join them that far, then continue alone." Alone. William's voice rose, triggering a bout of coughing. When he recovered, he fixed her with a stern look. "Absolutely not. I'll be careful. I'll bring trade goods as gifts. Sarah." His tone left no room for argument. "I've already lost your mother. I won't lose you too." The day passed in tense silence. Sarah attended to customers, the few locals who still relied on the trading post for essentials, while William dozed fitfully. As evening approached, she prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread, setting a plate beside her father's bed. "Not hungry," he murmured. "You need to keep up your strength." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed. "For when business improves." William regarded her with knowing eyes. "You're still planning to go, aren't you?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. Then, "If I don't try, we lose everything anyway." "There are worse things than losing a business, Sarah. This isn't just a business to you, and you know it," she gestured to the trading post around them. "This represents everything you believe in, that different peoples can coexist, that trade is better than conquest. You didn't spend 20 years building bridges between cultures just to watch it all disappear." William sighed deeply. "You're as stubborn as your mother." "I'll take that as a compliment." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "It was meant as one." Sarah took his hand, noting how thin it had become. "I've watched you negotiate with Navajo, with Comanche, with settlers who'd rather shoot first and talk later. You taught me that respect and fair dealing open doors that force cannot. Let me use what you've taught me." The silence stretched between Them, filled with the weight of all that remained unspoken, the fear, the pride, the desperate hope. Finally, William squeezed her hand. "Parker's a good man, but his caravan isn't equipped for what you're planning." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. "Does that mean—" "It means," William interrupted, "that if you're determined to risk your neck on this fool's errand, we'll do it. And properly." He pointed to a trunk in the corner. In there, the small cedar box. Sarah retrieved it, opening the intricately carved container to find a stack of papers. "These are trading protocols I recorded from my dealings with southern tribes," William explained. "Not Apache specifically, but similar customs. Study them tonight, and there's a pouch of silver dollars at the bottom, Spanish minted. Those are recognized everywhere." Sarah looked up, tears threatening. "Thank you." "Don't thank me for helping. You walk into danger." William's voice was gruff with emotion. "But if anyone can pull this off, it's Elizabeth Blackwood's daughter." That night, Sarah packed by lamplight, selecting trade goods carefully, preparing jerky and hardtack for the journey, studying her father's notes until her eyes burned. Outside, the desert night came alive with the sounds of coyotes and the whisper of wind through the scrub brush. Just before dawn, she saddled her horse, a sturdy chestnut mare named Penny, and secured her packs. William had risen from his sickbed to see her off, leaning heavily on a walking stick. "The Apache respect strength and honesty," he said, adjusting her saddle strap. "Don't show fear, but don't show aggression either." "I remember," Sarah said, checking her pistol before securing it in her saddlebag. "Not prominently displayed, but accessible if needed. Follow the map to the trading markers at Coyote Wash. Leave 3 stones stacked there. That's the old sign for peaceful trading intentions. Then wait, and if no one comes, give it 3 days, no more." William pressed a folded paper into her hand. "Your route home. Memorize it, then destroy it. Don't leave anything that could lead them back here if things go wrong." The eastern sky was beginning to lighten as Sarah mounted her horse. From this height, she could see the trading post in its entirety, the main building with its attached living quarters, the corral, the storage sheds, small, but it had been the only home she'd ever known. "Sometimes the greatest risk brings the greatest reward," William said, reaching up to touch her hand one last time. Sarah nodded, throat tight with emotion. "I'll be back with a trade agreement that will save us." "Just come back," he replied. "That's all I ask." With a final nod, Sarah turned her horse toward the south and the unknown territories beyond. The silver compass hung around her neck now, a talisman against uncertainty. Whatever waited in the lands ahead, hostility, danger, or perhaps the salvation they desperately needed, Sarah Blackwood rode toward it with her head high and her heart determined. She didn't look back, even when she reached the Red Canyon walls that marked the edge of familiar territory. She couldn't bear to see her father's diminishing figure, standing alone at the edge of everything they had built together. Nakohe moved like shadow across the sun-baked ridgeline, his moccasins finding purchase on stones that would have betrayed a less experienced scout. The eagle feather secured to his leather headband, a talisman passed down from his father, fluttered slightly in the warm breeze. In the language of his people, Nakohe meant footprint, a name earned during his youth when he could track game, that left no visible sign to others. At 30 summers, he had earned respect among the Chiricahua Apache, not through boasting, but through the quiet competence that kept his people fed and safe. While younger warriors eagerly counted coup and spoke of battle glory around evening fires, Nakohe had seen enough bloodshed to know its true cost. He paused, crouching to study the distant dust cloud moving through the valley below. Riders, perhaps. 5 or 6, following the old trading path that skirted the eastern edge of his people's territory. White men, judging by their direct route and lack of caution. Soldiers, settlers, either meant potential trouble Nakohe touched the knife at his belt, then the small pouch containing sacred items that hung around his neck. Among them was a small carved wooden bird his father had made, the last gift before falling to cavalry. Bullets 6 winters past. The memory still burned like embers in his chest. Be the eyes of our people, not their fist, Taza, the elder, had counseled when sending Nakohe to patrol the borders. We need knowledge more than scalps. The band's council was divided on how to respond to the increasing encroachment of white settlers. Some, like Kichi, called for war, for driving the invaders back through fear and blood. Others, like Taza, advocated watchful caution. The white man's numbers grew like grass after summer rain, and their weapons grew more deadly with each passing season. Nakohe had seen the aftermath of both approaches. He had helped bury warriors who died in glorious but futile attacks. He had also watched other tribes reduced to begging after their hunting grounds were seized by those who came with papers and claimed ownership of the earth. A movement below caught his attention. The riders had separated. One continued south while the others turned west. Curious, he would follow the lone rider first, then catch up with the larger group if needed. The sun climbed higher as Nakohe tracked the solitary figure. Strange. This one rode differently than most white men, more at ease in the saddle, more aware of the surroundings. Still foolish to travel alone in these lands, but perhaps not entirely without skill. By midday, he had closed enough distance to see that the rider was smaller than he'd first thought. A young man, perhaps. No, the form in the saddle, the way. The rider sat, a woman, a white woman, alone in Apache territory. Nakohe frowned. This made no sense. White women didn't venture into these lands without heavy escort. Was it a trap of some kind? A lure to draw out Apache scouts? He shadowed her progress through the afternoon, watching as she consulted what appeared to be a map, then deliberately left the established trail to follow a dry creek bed that led deeper into the territory. She stopped at several points to examine rock formations or plants, making notes in a small book. Not a lost traveler, then. She had purpose. As the sun began its descent, the woman reached Coyote Wash, an ancient trading spot where generations ago different peoples had exchanged goods. Few remembered its significance now, yet the woman dismounted and, to Nakohe's surprise, deliberately arranged 3 stones in the old sign for peaceful trading. She knew the old ways. But how? Nakohe settled into a hidden position to observe. The woman set up a small camp, built a fire with reasonable skill, and tended her horse. She kept her weapon, a pistol, within reach but not in hand. Every movement spoke of someone, raised on the frontier, not in eastern cities. Night fell. The woman remained at her camp, occasionally writing in her book by firelight. Nakohe was considering his next move when a new sound reached his ears. Hoofbeats, approaching fast from the North Riders at night. Not Apache, bandits. The notorious Carson brothers had been raiding along the borderlands for months, preying on isolated homesteads, ambushing travelers, then blaming their attacks on Apache warriors. They respected no boundaries and threatened all who lived in these territories. Nakohe faced a choice. The woman was nothing to him, a trespasser at best, an enemy scout at worst. Apache law did not require him to intervene in the affairs of outsiders. Yet something in her deliberate use of the old trading signals, in her solitary journey into hostile territory, spoke of either great courage or great desperation. Perhaps both. The riders were nearly upon her camp, 6 men heavily armed. The woman had noticed now, hastily gathering her belongings, but it was too late to flee. Nakohe touched his father's eagle feather and made his decision. Knocking an arrow to his bowstring, he took aim at the lead rider. The band's council might question his judgment later, but he would not watch a lone woman, any woman, slaughtered by men without honor. The first arrow flew true. Sarah awoke to pain and the scent of unfamiliar herbs. Her head throbbed where it had struck stone during the chaotic attack. Disoriented, she forced her eyes open to find herself lying beneath a crude shelter of branches and canvas, part of it torn from her own tent. Memories flooded back in fragments, the bandits emerging from the darkness, her pistol firing once before being knocked from her hand, arrows suddenly raining from the ridge above, and a warrior descending like a vengeful spirit. Then blackness. She tried to sit up, wincing as fresh pain lanced through her side. Quieto, a deep voice from nearby. Still. Sarah turned her head carefully to see a man crouched several feet away, watching her with intense, evaluating eyes. The Apache warrior from the night before, the one who had somehow driven off 6 armed bandits. His face was weathered by sun and wind, his black hair held back with a band decorated with a single eagle feather. A knife hung at his belt, and, though his bow was set aside, it remained within easy reach. "You speak Spanish?" Sarah managed, her throat dry. "Poco." He gestured toward a water skin nearby. "Drink." Sarah reached for it cautiously, never taking her eyes off him. The water tasted of leather and minerals, but it was cool and eased her parched throat. Only then did she take in her surroundings. They were in a hidden canyon, its entrance barely visible between towering rock formations. Her belongings had been gathered in a pile, her horse tethered nearby. Her hand instinctively moved to her belt where her father's broken wagon wheel medallion usually hung. A piece of the first wagon he'd brought west, fashioned into a good luck charm. It was gone. The warrior noticed her searching motion and reached into a pouch at his waist. He withdrew the medallion, studying it before holding it out. "Yours," he said. Sarah took it with relief. "Thank you. It was my father's." He nodded once, though whether in understanding or merely acknowledgement she couldn't tell. "My name is Sarah," she said, touching her chest. "Sarah Blackwood." The warrior considered her for a long moment. "Nakohe," he finally replied, with a similar gesture. Sarah attempted to stand, but found her legs unsteady. A crude bandage wrapped her midsection, spotted with dried blood. "You are hurt," Nakohe said in halting Spanish. "Bandit's knife." Sarah remembered now, the flash of a blade as one of the attackers closed in. She lifted her shirt slightly to examine the bandage, recognizing the poultice of herbs pressed against the wound. "You did this?" she asked. "Helped me." Nakohe moved to the small fire he'd built, stirring something in a clay pot. "You would be dead. Bad men." Why? The question encompassed many things. Why had he saved her? Why had he tended her wounds? Why hadn't he simply left her or taken her as prisoner? Nakohe seemed to understand the layers of her question. He regarded her thoughtfully before responding. "You made the 3 stones." He mimicked stacking stones. "Old sign for trade." Sarah nodded eagerly. "Yes, I came to establish trade, peaceful trade. My father is William Blackwood of the Blackwood Trading Post." Nakohe's expression remained impassive. "Why woman alone? Dangerous." "Necessity," Sarah replied simply. "We need new trading partners. I heard your people sometimes trade with Mexicans. To the south, some bands, not all." He offered her a wooden cup of broth. "Some Apache kill all who enter their land." Sarah accepted the broth, trying not to show how the casual statement chilled her. "And your band?" "Depends." His gaze was direct, evaluating. "Why should we trade with white eyes? They take land, break promises." "I'm not them," Sarah said. "I'm just trying to save my father's trading post. Fair trade. Goods you need for things we need." Nakohe rose and walked to the canyon entrance, surveying the landscape beyond. "Your horse is gone, supplies scattered." He gestured at her injured side. "You cannot travel now." The reality of her situation struck Sarah with full force. She was deep in Apache territory, injured, with limited supplies and no horse. Even if this warrior had saved her life, she had no guarantee of his continued protection. "Will you help me get back?" she asked. Nakohe turned, his expression unreadable. "Back where?" To your people who shoot Apache on sight. To the border territories, Sarah clarified. I can find my way from there. He considered this, then nodded once. When you are stronger. 3 days, maybe 4. Relief flooded through her, though she recognized how tenuous her situation remained. Thank you. Nakohe returned to the fire. Rest now. We move at night. As Sarah sipped the broth, she studied her unlikely protector. Everything she'd been taught said she should fear this man, yet he had saved her life and tended her wounds. His manner was guarded, but not hostile. You speak Spanish well, she ventured. Enough for Mexican traders, he replied. You also. My father taught me. He believes in building bridges through commerce. Something flickered in Nakohe's eyes at that. Recognition, perhaps, or skepticism. Commerce often brings soldiers after, he said. Not this time, Sarah promised. This is about survival. Yours and mine. Nakohe added wood to the fire, sending sparks spiraling upward. We will see, he said, neither accepting nor rejecting her assertion. For now, you live because of Apache medicine. Tomorrow, we will speak more. With that, he moved to the canyon entrance to keep watch, leaving Sarah to contemplate the strange twist of fate that had placed her life in the hands of a man whose people she had been raised to fear, and who had every reason to fear hers in return. Dawn broke with Nakohe already alert, studying tracks at the canyon's hidden entrance. Sarah joined him, moving gingerly, her side still tender, but the herbal poultice having worked wonders overnight. What is it? She asked, noting his furrowed brow. Bandits. Nakohe pointed to faint impressions in the dirt. They search for us. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. How many? 4. He straightened. 2 died from arrows. They want revenge now, and their leader wants me. Sarah's voice was grim. I recognized him, Lucas Carson. He's raided settlements all along the border. Nakohe nodded. Bad reputation, kills Apache too, then blames other white men. The revelation surprised Sarah. You know of him? All border tribes know Carson brothers. Nakohe gestured for her to follow him back into the shelter of the canyon. We must move soon. While gathering their meager supplies, Sarah discovered a crumpled paper among her scattered belongings, a wanted poster that must have fallen from her saddlebag during the attack. Lucas Carson's bearded face glared up from the weathered page, the bounty listed as $500. He's wanted. By your law too, Nakohe observed, looking over her shoulder. Dead or alive, Sarah confirmed. He's killed settlers, travelers, anyone with something worth taking. Nakohe studied the poster with interest. Your people hunt him? Army patrols mostly, Sarah replied. But they rarely venture this far into contested territory. A look of understanding crossed Nakohe's face. So he hides here, where soldiers fear to follow, raiding both Apache and white settlements. Using the conflict between our peoples to his advantage, Sarah added, seeing the full picture. When he attacks white settlers, they blame Apache. When he attacks Apache, we blame white eyes, Nakohe finished. Clever snake. A moment of shared comprehension passed between them, the recognition of a common enemy, exploiting their mutual distrust. Nakohe packed the last of their supplies into a small hide bag. We travel light. Leave everything not needed. Sarah hesitated, over her father's journal, then tucked it securely inside her shirt. Everything else she reluctantly abandoned. They set out as the sun climbed higher, Nakohe leading them through narrow passages between towering rocks, following routes invisible to untrained eyes. Despite her frontier upbringing, Sarah struggled to match his pace over the rugged terrain. How far to the borderlands? She asked during a brief rest. 3 days, Nakohe replied, if bandits don't find us first. He offered her water from his own skin, a small gesture that spoke volumes in this harsh landscape where survival often hung by the thinnest thread. Why did you help me? Sarah finally asked the question that had lingered since she awoke in his care. Nakohe considered his answer carefully. You used old trading sign, respected old ways. Carson brothers respect nothing. He shrugged slightly. Bad men should not win always. It wasn't friendship or alliance, merely the recognition that some enemies transcended the divisions between their peoples. Sarah accepted this practical explanation with a nod. By midday, they had reached an abandoned line shack, a crude shelter once used by prospectors before Apache raids had driven them out. Nakohe approached cautiously, checking for signs of recent occupation before allowing Sarah to enter. Inside, dust covered everything, but the roof remained mostly intact. A rusted tin box caught Sarah's attention. She pried it open to find abandoned mining supplies and, surprisingly, a folded paper. "What is this?" Nakohe asked, watching her unfold what appeared to be a map. "Supply routes," Sarah said, studying the faded lines. "And look, notes about Carson's gang. This must have belonged to an army scout." Nakohe examined the map with interest. "This shows their hiding places. Some of them." And Sarah's finger traced a particular marking. This might be their main camp. The unexpected discovery changed everything. Knowledge of Carson's hideout would be valuable to both their peoples, evidence that the raids were not the work of either Apache or settlers, but a third party profiting from their conflict. "If we could prove Carson is behind the attacks on both sides," Sarah began. "Many would not believe," Nakohe said realistically. "Hate runs deep." "But some might." Sarah met his gaze, enough to make a difference. Before Nakohe could respond, a sound outside froze them both. Horses approaching. He moved silently to the window, then motioned urgently for Sarah to hide. "Carson," she whispered. Nakohe nodded grimly. "They found our trail." For a terrible moment they stood in silence, the thud of approaching hoofbeats growing louder. Then Nakohe made a decision. He pulled Sarah toward the back of the shack, revealing a trap door hidden beneath an old crate. "Root cellar," he whispered. "Go." Sarah descended into the musty darkness, Nakohe following and easing the door closed. Above them, just as riders reached the shack, in the cramped space, they stood pressed together, barely breathing as boots scraped the floorboards overhead. Sarah's heart pounded so loudly she feared it might betray them. Nakohe's hand found her arm in the darkness, not a gesture of comfort, but a signal for absolute stillness. Yet in that moment of shared danger, something shifted between them. No longer simply captor and captive, or reluctant allies of convenience, but two people whose survival now depended entirely upon mutual trust. Above them, Carson's voice rasped orders to his men. "Search everywhere!" That Apache scout can't have gotten far with the woman. Sarah and Nakohe exchanged glances in the dim light, filtering through the trapdoor cracks, each reading the same determination in the other's eyes. The hunt had only begun. Twilight painted the canyon walls in deepening shades of purple and crimson as Sarah and Nakohe emerged from their hiding place. The bandits had searched the abandoned shack thoroughly before moving on, convinced their quarry had continued south. "They will return," Nakohe said, studying the horizon. "Carson is like wolf, does not forget scent." Sarah nodded, wincing as she climbed from the root cellar. The day's exertions had reopened her wound, a spreading crimson stain marking her shirt. Nakohe noticed immediately. "You bleed again. We need shelter, water." "I can keep going," Sarah insisted, though her face had paled. Nakohe shook his head. "Injured prey is caught prey." He considered their options, then pointed to a distant ridge. "There is a place, sacred to my people. Water flows there, even in dry times." They traveled under cover of darkness, Nakohe supporting Sarah when the terrain grew steep. The moon cast enough light to navigate, but kept them hidden from searching eyes. By midnight they reached a narrow passage between towering rock formations. "Few know this way," Nakohe explained, leading her through. "Old ones came here for visions long ago." The passage opened suddenly into a hidden valley. Moonlight revealed ancient dwellings carved into the cliff face, and petroglyphs covered the smooth rock walls, spirals, animal figures, and handprints from people long vanished. "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered, awed by the ancient sanctuary. Nakohe seemed uncomfortable. A sacred place, not for outsiders. "Then why bring me here?" He hesitated. "You showed respect with the 3 stones, and—" he gestured to her wound. "You need healing." A small spring bubbled from the base of the cliff, forming a clear pool before disappearing again underground. Nakohe guided her there, then began gathering specific plants growing among the rocks. "Sit," he instructed. "Water is good here." Sarah obeyed, grateful for the rest. She watched as Nakohe expertly crushed the plants between smooth stones, adding water to form a paste. His movements were precise, practiced, the motions of someone who had dressed many wounds. "You learned this from your father?" she asked as he approached with the medicine. Surprise flickered across his face. "Yes. He was healer before—" He stopped abruptly. "Before what?" Nakohe's expression hardened. "Before soldiers killed him." 6 winters passed. The statement hung between them, a stark reminder of the blood-soaked history that separated their peoples. "I'm sorry," Sarah said quietly. Nakohe didn't respond. Instead, he gently removed her bandage and applied the fresh poultice. His touch was impersonal but careful, his focus absolute. "My mother died when I was 12, Sarah offered, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "Fever took her." Nakohe nodded, acknowledging her loss without comment. When he finished with the bandage, he moved to start a small, smokeless fire near the cliff base. As they sat in the firelight's glow, Sarah studied the ancient markings surrounding them. "What do they mean?" she asked, pointing to a spiral pattern above. Nakohe followed her gaze. For a moment, she thought he would refuse to answer. Then, surprisingly, he spoke. "Journey of spirit," he explained. "From this world to next, always." Moving like water, he indicated other symbols. These tell story of first people, how they emerged from earth, how Coyote brought fire. "My people have similar stories," Sarah ventured, "about creation, about how things came to be." "All people have stories," Nakohe acknowledged. "Not all remember them." He rose and approached the wall, touching a series of handprints with unexpected reverence. "These are oldest, made when world was new, children of ancestors." Sarah joined him, careful not to touch the sacred markings herself. "Your ancestors lived here?" "Not mine. People before. Disappeared when drought came." He gestured around the valley. "We found these places empty. Keep them sacred still. You respect those who came before, even though they weren't your people," Sarah observed. Nakohe considered this. "All who walk with respect are connected." He looked at her directly. "Some white eyes think nothing sacred except what they build themselves." Sarah couldn't deny the truth in his words. "Not all of us." "No," he conceded. "Not all." They returned to the fire, where Nakohe offered her dried meat from his provisions. As they ate in silence, Sarah realized this was the first conversation they'd shared that wasn't solely about survival. "My father believes trade can bridge differences where words fail," she said. "That's why he sent me with this." She withdrew, her trader's ledger from inside her shirt, showing him the carefully detailed inventory and fair price listings. Nakohe examined the neat columns with interest. "Your father taught you numbers?" "And reading, geography, natural philosophy," Sarah replied. "He believes knowledge shouldn't be limited by—" She hesitated. "By what others think proper for a woman." "Apache women are strong," Nakohe said. "Simply, they speak in council, own their own property, choose their husbands." This surprised Sarah. "I didn't know that." "Much you don't know about my people," Nakohe said, but without hostility. "Much I don't know about yours." The fire crackled between them, illuminating 2 faces from worlds apart, yet for this moment sharing the same light. "Tomorrow we reach. Decision point, Nakohe said finally. Canyon divides. One path leads to border territories, your people, other to my village. You would take me to your village? Sarah asked, startled. Nakohe studied her face in the firelight. Elder there, Taza, is wise man. Might listen to trade talk. He shrugged slightly. Or might have us both killed for bringing outsider. Despite the grim alternative, Sarah felt a flicker of hope. This was why she had come. A chance to establish contact, to create the trading relationship that might save her father's business. Which path will we take? She asked. Nakohe added a small branch to the fire, watching the flames consume it. Sleep now, he said. Tomorrow is soon enough for such decisions. As Sarah settled beside the fire, the ancient petroglyphs seemed to shift and dance in the flickering light, telling stories of those who had sought shelter in this sacred place. Long before either Apache or white settlers had claimed these lands as their own, morning arrived with distant thunder echoing through the canyon, a rare summer storm building over the mountains. Nakohe surveyed the darkening sky with concern. Flash floods come quickly here, he warned. We must cross Lower Canyon before rains reach us. They packed swiftly, Sarah noting how her wound felt remarkably better after Nakohe's treatment. As they prepared to leave, she noticed him placing a small offering of tobacco near the ancient handprints. Giving thanks? She asked. Nakohe nodded. For shelter, for healing water. He gestured toward her side. For your strength returning. The acknowledgement surprised her, but before she could respond, he was already leading the way out of the sacred valley. The path descended steeply through narrow passages where centuries of flash floods had carved smooth channels in the stone. By midday, they reached a section where the canyon floor widened, revealing a cave-like opening on the far side where water disappeared underground. The crossing place, Nakohe explained, pointing to the dark tunnel. Water runs beneath mountain. Here, comes out 3 miles beyond. Sarah eyed the forbidding entrance skeptically. We're going through there. Fastest way. Safe from Carson, too. He studied her face. Unless you fear dark places. I don't fear the dark, Sarah responded, perhaps too quickly. Just what might live in it. Nakohe almost smiled. The first hint of humor he'd shown. Bats, mostly, harmless. The first heavy raindrops began to fall as they reached the tunnel entrance. Nako fashioned a crude torch from materials in his pack, and they plunged into the darkness just as the storm broke in earnest behind them. The underground passage was eerily beautiful. Water-carved limestone glistened in the torchlight, and natural skylights occasionally broke through the ceiling, casting shafts of daylight into the depths. The stream beside their path gurgled softly, still low, but clearly rising with the rainfall above. Stay close, Nakohe cautioned. Easy to become lost here. They had traveled perhaps half a mile when the tunnel floor began to slope more steeply. The stream quickened alongside them, swelling visibly with each passing minute. Distant thunder reverberated through the stone around them. The water rises faster than I expected, Nakohe said, concern edging his voice. Storm must be heavy above. They quickened their pace, but soon the path narrowed until the rising water reached their ankles, then their knees. The current strengthened, tugging at their legs. There, Nakohe pointed to a ledge above the water level. We must climb. They scrambled up the slick stone wall, the torch sputtering as spray from the increasingly violent current struck it. Just as they reached the ledge, the torch went out, plunging them into near-total darkness. Stay here, Nakohe instructed. Water should not reach this height. A deafening crack of thunder shook the tunnel, and suddenly a wall of water surged around the bend ahead, churning with debris from above. Sarah pressed herself against the rock wall as the flood roared past, just feet below their precarious perch. In the chaos, she felt Nakohe lose his footing beside her. Without thinking, she lunged for him, grabbing his arm as he slipped toward. The torrent! For a terrifying moment, his full weight pulled against her grip, threatening to drag them both into the deadly current. "Hold on!" she cried, bracing her feet against a rock outcropping and using all her strength to pull him back. Somehow, he found purchase with his feet and pushed upward, allowing Sarah to haul him back onto the ledge. They collapsed together against the wall, breathing heavily as the flood raged below. "You saved me," Nakohe said when he caught his breath, genuine surprise in his voice. "You've saved me twice already," Sarah responded. "Seemed only fair." They sat in darkness, shoulders touching, listening to the water gradually recede as the flash flood passed. Neither spoke of how close they'd come to death, or of Sarah's instinctive action to save a man who, by all conventional thinking, should have been her enemy. When light finally began filtering down from a crack in the ceiling above, Nakohe turned to study her face. "Why did you come to Apache land?" he asked directly. "Truth now." Sarah met his gaze. "I told you to establish trade. Many traders want Apache goods. They send men with guns to take, not trade." His eyes narrowed. "Why you? Why alone?" She withdrew her father's ledger again, opening it to show the columns of red figures. "My father is dying," she said simply. "Our trading post is failing. The army changed their supply routes, and settlers are too afraid of raids to travel our way." She closed the book. "Without new trading partners, we lose everything." Nakohe was silent for a long moment. "So you risk life to save father's dream, wouldn't you?" Sarah asked. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, perhaps. "Yes," he admitted. "I would." The water had subsided enough for them to continue, though the path remained treacherous. As they carefully made their way forward, Nakohe spoke again. "My village lies one day's journey north when we exit tunnel. Elder Taza might listen to trading talk." He glanced at her. No promises. Sarah felt her heart quicken. "You're taking me to your people?" "Taking you to Taza," Nakohe clarified. "He remembers time before war with white eyes, understands world is changing." He stepped carefully around a fallen rock. "Others in tribe will not welcome you." "I understand the risk," Sarah said. "For both of us." Nakohe nodded grimly. "If you speak true about fair trade, maybe good comes. If not..." He left the alternative unspoken. They reached a point where daylight streamed through the tunnel exit ahead. Before stepping into the light, Nakohe turned to face her. "From here, we walk different path," he said. "Not enemies, but not yet friends." He extended his hand, a gesture he must have learned from white traders. "I, Nakohe, will speak for you to Taza, but watch words carefully. Apache patience is not endless." Sarah took his offered hand, feeling the calluses of a life spent surviving in this harsh land. "I, Sarah Blackwood, will honor your trust," she promised. Their joined hands sealed a fragile agreement between worlds, an alliance born of necessity, tested by danger, and now venturing into territory far more perilous than any flash flood or bandit's ambush. Dusk descended as they approached the hidden Apache encampment. Nakohe had instructed Sarah to walk slightly behind him, not out of subservience, he explained, but to signal she came under his protection. Still, nothing could have prepared her for the electric tension that rippled through the camp as they appeared. Women stopped their work, children were quickly ushered into wiki-ups, and warriors materialized from nowhere, weapons ready but not yet raised. The small settlement, nestled between protective rock formations, consisted of perhaps 20 dwellings and showed signs of being temporary, a seasonal camp rather than a permanent village. Nakohe raised his hand in a gesture of peace, speaking rapidly in Apache. Sarah recognized her name amid the foreign syllables and understood he was explaining her presence. The responses were swift and hostile, several warriors advancing with threatening postures. One man stepped forward, younger than Nakohe, but with fierce eyes and a necklace of bear claws that marked him as a renowned fighter. He spoke angrily, repeatedly gesturing towards Sarah and the distant territories beyond. "Kichi believes you a spy," Nakohe translated tersely. "Says I should not have brought white eyes here." Before Sarah could respond, an authoritative voice cut through the tension. The crowd parted to reveal an elderly man emerging from the largest dwelling. Despite his age, he carried himself with unmistakable dignity, his deeply lined face bearing the wisdom of decades. "Taza," Nakohe whispered to Sarah, "our elder, follow my lead." Taza approached slowly, leaning on a walking stick adorned with eagle feathers and small symbolic objects. His piercing gaze traveled from Nakohe to Sarah, then back again, his expression unreadable. "Nakohe brings stranger to our hearth," he said, in surprisingly clear Spanish. "This is unexpected." Nakohe bowed his head slightly. "Elder, I found this woman using the old trading signals at Coyote Wash. She was attacked by Carson's bandits. I intervened." Taza's eyebrows rose slightly. "The old signals? Few remember these." He turned his attention to Sarah. "You know our ways, yet you are not Mexican trader." "My father taught me, sir," Sarah replied respectfully. "William Blackwood of the Blackwood Trading Post. He learned from those who traded with southern tribes before the conflicts began." "Blackwood," Taza repeated thoughtfully. "I have heard this name. A fair man, some say." Kitchi interrupted with another angry outburst in Apache. Several warriors murmured agreement. Taza silenced them with a raised hand. "The woman will be judged by her own words and actions, not by fears born of past injuries." He gestured toward his dwelling. "Come, we will speak inside. Nakohe, you also." The elder's wickiup was larger than the others, its interior dimly lit by a small central fire. Taza lowered himself to a sitting position on a woven mat, indicating Sarah and Nakohe should do the same. From a carved wooden box, Taza withdrew a peace pipe, its bowl intricately carved from red stone, its stem decorated with beadwork and feathers. "Before words are spoken that may shape days to come, we share smoke," he explained, carefully filling the pipe with a mixture of tobacco and herbs. "This is our way." Sarah nodded, having heard of such ceremonies but never expecting to participate. In one, Taza lit the pipe, drew smoke, and offered it first to Nakohe, who repeated the ritual before passing it to Sarah. She hesitated only briefly before accepting, careful to mimic their actions exactly. The smoke was harsh in her lungs, but she managed not to cough, earning a nod of approval from Taza. "Now," the elder said when the ritual was complete, "tell me why a trader's daughter travels alone into lands where her kind are not welcome." Sarah explained her situation honestly. Her father's illness, their failing business, their need for new trading partners. She showed Taza her father's ledger with its fair pricing and detailed inventory. "We seek mutual benefit," she concluded. "Goods you might need in exchange for items unique to your territories." Taza listened without interruption, his weathered fingers occasionally tracing the figures in her ledger. "Many white traders have spoken of fair exchange before," he said finally. "Often their words proved false. My father has traded fairly with Navajo and Pueblo peoples for 20 years, Sarah countered. "Ask any who have dealt with him." "And what does Nakohe say?" Taza turned to the warrior. "You have traveled with this woman. What do you read in her heart?" Nakohe considered his words carefully. "She saved my life in the underground river," he said simply. "When the flash flood came, she could have let me fall. She did not." Taza's eyes widened slightly at this unexpected information. "And you believe her purpose is truly trade, not gathering knowledge of our locations or strength?" "I believe she speaks truth about her father and their need," Nakohe replied. "Beyond that I cannot say." Taza fell silent, contemplating. Outside, they could hear the murmur of the tribe discussing the stranger in their midst. Finally, the elder spoke. "You ask much, Sarah Blackwood. To bring an outsider here breaks our ways of safety." Sarah's heart sank, but Taza continued. "Yet the old trading signals you used are from times when different peoples met in peace. Perhaps these ancient ways speak to us across years of blood." He set down her ledger. "Tonight, you will share our evening meal. You will respect our customs and answer questions truthfully. Tomorrow, we will speak more of this trading possibility." Relief flooded through Sarah. It wasn't agreement, but it was a chance, more than she had dared hope for. "Thank you, Elder Taza," she said sincerely. As they exited the wickiup, Taza placed a gnarled hand on Nakohe's shoulder. "She remains your responsibility," he said in their language. "The council will question your judgment in this matter." "I understand," Nakohe replied. That evening, beneath a sky ablaze with stars, Sarah sat at the communal fire, acutely aware of curious and hostile gazes alike. Nakohe remained nearby, his presence her only shield in this world where she was the outsider, the potential enemy. When drums began to sound and voices rose in songs older than any written history, Sarah watched with respect and growing wonder. Whatever came tomorrow, tonight she was witnessing something few outsiders had ever seen, the living heart of a people who had survived against all odds in a land that forgave no weakness. Dawn broke with Sarah already awake, having spent a restless night in the small shelter Nakohe had arranged for her at the camp's edge. Women moved about, tending morning fires and preparing food, their curious glances more open now without. The men's immediate hostility. Nakohe appeared carrying a simply crafted bow and a small bundle wrapped in hide. "Taza says you stay 3 days," he informed her. "Learn our ways before trade talk." 3 days. Sarah hadn't anticipated such delay. "My father cannot change Elder's decision," Nakohe interrupted. "This is respect he shows you. Most outsiders would be sent away or killed." Put that way, Sarah could hardly argue. She nodded acceptance, and Nakohe handed her the bundle. "For you," he said, "to learn." Inside was a handcrafted bow, smaller than his own, but made with similar care, along with 3 arrows. Sarah looked up questioningly. "Apache women also hunt," he explained. "Not just men, you will learn." The first day passed in a whirlwind of new experiences. Under Nakohe's instruction, Sarah practiced with the bow until her fingers blistered, learning the proper stance and draw. Several younger tribal members gathered to watch, initially mocking her efforts, then growing quieter as her natural coordination began to show results. "You learn quickly," Nakohe acknowledged when she finally hit the target, a small hide draped over a bush, on her 15th attempt. "My father taught me to shoot a rifle when I was 12, Sarah explained, flexing her sore fingers. "The principles aren't so different." A young Apache boy, about 10 years old, approached cautiously, pointing to her bow. "Nadiu kaum," he said slowly. "He says, aim higher," Nakohe translated. Sarah smiled at the boy and nodded, adjusting her stance as suggested. Her next shot struck closer to the center. The boy grinned, revealing a missing front tooth, before scampering away to rejoin his friends. "Small victories," Nakohe commented. "Children accept more easily than elders." By afternoon, Sarah was invited, somewhat reluctantly, to join the women preparing the evening meal. An older woman named Nitika demonstrated how to grind mesquite beans into flour, correcting Sarah's technique with firm hands and rapid Apache instructions that needed no translation. "She says you grind like impatient child," Nakohe called from where he sat mending a leather quiver nearby. "Tell her I'm grateful for her teaching," Sarah replied, earning a surprised grunt of approval from Nitika. That evening, as they ate around the communal fire, Sarah noticed Taza observing her interactions with the tribe. She had been careful to follow all customs Nakohe had explained, waiting until elders began eating before taking food, expressing thanks in the few Apache words she'd learned, showing respect without subservience. The second day brought deeper immersion. Sarah accompanied several women to gather plants, learning which were used for medicine, food, and dyes. Her knowledge of similar plants from her own experience occasionally bridged communication gaps, earning reluctant nods from the Apache women. When they returned, Nakohe was waiting with a small group of hunters. "We go for meat," he announced. "You come." Surprise rippled through both the hunting party and the women at this unprecedented invitation. Kichi, who would lead the hunt, protested vigorously. "He says, 'White woman will scare game,'" Nakohe translated, though Sarah had gathered as much from Kichi's gestures. "Tell him I can move quietly," she responded. Then, making a decision, she added, "And I have another skill to offer." From her belongings, Sarah retrieved her father's small spyglass, a valuable tool she'd kept hidden until now. She extended it, demonstrating its use by focusing on a distant ridge. Kichi's expression shifted from disdain to cautious interest. After examining the spyglass himself, he grudgingly nodded permission for her to join them. The hunting party moved with practiced stealth through brush and rocky terrain. Sarah kept pace, careful to follow Nakohe's silent instructions on where to step and when to freeze. When they spotted a small herd of pronghorn antelope in a valley below, Kichi signaled for the hunters to spread out. Nakohe guided Sarah to a position overlooking the valley. "Watch and learn," he whispered. What followed was a masterful demonstration of coordinated hunting, two warriors driving the herd subtly toward waiting archers. No wasted movement, no unnecessary noise, just generations of perfected technique. When they returned to camp with 3 pronghorns, Sarah had gained new appreciation for the skills that had kept the Apache alive in these harsh lands. That evening, as she helped prepare the meat according to Nitika's instructions, Nakohe approached with a small wooden cup. "You did well today," he said, offering the drink. "Kichi says your eyes are sharp. Coming from the hostile warrior, this was substantial praise." Sarah accepted the cup, finding it contained a mild, sweet liquid she didn't recognize. "Mescal," Nakohe explained. "From desert plant, special drink." As firelight danced across the camp and distant singing began, Sarah realized she was being offered not just a beverage, but inclusion, however temporary, in tribal custom. "The stars are different here," she observed quietly as they sat slightly. "Apart from the main gathering, same stars," Nakohe corrected, "different eyes seeing them." The simple observation struck Sarah with unexpected force. "That's true of many things, isn't it?" Nakohe considered this, then nodded slowly. "My people see horse as brother who carries our burdens. White soldiers see only animal to be used, replaced." "Not all white people think that way," Sarah said. "My father taught me every creature has its own wisdom." "Your father," Nakohe said carefully, "sounds unlike other white men I have known." "He believes understanding between peoples is possible," Sarah replied, "even when history suggests otherwise." Nakohe's gaze remained on the stars. "Understanding is like distant water in desert. We see it, but path there is long, difficult, but not impossible. Requires great thirst for it." By the 3rd day, subtle changes had occurred. Children no longer hid when Sarah passed. Several women nodded greeting instead of turning away. Even Kichi's glares had moderated to watchful assessment rather than open hostility. Sarah's final test came unexpectedly. Taza summoned her to his dwelling, where several tribal elders had gathered. In the center lay an array of plants, tools, and weapons. "Show what you have learned," Taza instructed. "Name these things and their purpose." One by one, Sarah identified each item: the healing plants, the tools for scraping hides, the ceremonial items. When she correctly described the sacred use of a particular feathered wand, a murmur of surprise ran through the elders. Taza nodded with approval. "Tomorrow," he announced, "we will speak of trade." Morning brought a solemn atmosphere to the Apache camp. Women spoke in hushed tones as they went about their tasks, and warriors gathered in small groups, their discussions intense and private. Today, the council would decide whether to entertain Sarah's trading proposal, a decision with implications far beyond simple commerce. Nakohe found Sarah preparing by the small fire outside her shelter. "Council meets when sun reaches highest point," he informed her. Taza says, bring your trading map. Sarah nodded, carefully retrieving her father's ledger and the hand-drawn map she had created showing potential trading routes. She had spent hours meticulously detailing safe passageways, water sources, and meeting points that would minimize risk to both parties. "Will you be there?" she asked, trying to keep anxiety from her voice. "As your speaker," Nakohe confirmed. "I have responsibility for bringing you here." The unspoken implication was clear. His standing within the tribe was now tied to her actions. If the council rejected her proposal, Nakohe's judgment would be questioned. If they accepted it and later faced betrayal, worse consequences would follow. "I won't let you down," Sarah promised. Nakohe studied her face. "Speak true words today. Council sees through false promises." When the time came, Sarah followed Nakohe to the center of the encampment, where 9 tribal leaders, including Taza and Kichi, had arranged themselves in a semicircle. A small fire burned between them and the space where Sarah would stand. The rest of the tribe gathered behind their leaders, silent witnesses to this unprecedented meeting. Taza opened the proceedings in Apache, then switched to Spanish for Sarah's benefit. "We gather to hear words of trade from the daughter of Blackwood, the trader. Let truth flow like clear water between peaks." Sarah stepped forward, conscious of dozens of eyes evaluating her every movement. She had dressed simply but with care, showing respect without attempting to mimic Apache ways. "I am grateful for the council's willingness to listen," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "My father has taught me that honest trade benefits all who participate." She unfolded her map, placing stones at its corners to hold it open. "I propose 3 possible trading routes," she explained, indicating the carefully drawn lines. "Each offers different advantages. The northern route provides more water sources but crosses territories sometimes patrolled by soldiers. The southern path is longer but more secluded." Kichi spoke sharply in Apache, pointing to marks on the map. "He asks how we know these are not trap locations for ambush," Nakohe translated. Sarah met Kichi's suspicious gaze directly. "Because I would be the one making the journey from our side," she replied. "My life would be at risk equally with yours." This answer prompted murmurs of surprise. A female elder leaned forward to study the map more closely. "What goods do you seek from Apache lands?" she asked in halting Spanish. Sarah had anticipated this question. "Medicinal herbs that don't grow in settled territories, specifically the red root that treats fever and the yellow flower your healers use for chest ailments. Also, obsidian from the volcanic hills, which craftsmen value highly, and information, knowledge of seasonal water sources and safe passages that could benefit travelers of all kinds." "And what do you offer in return?" asked another council member. Sarah opened her ledger. "Tools, metal needles, knives with better steel than those traded from Mexican sources, cloth of higher quality, salt, medicines we have that you might need, seeds for growing new plants," she paused, "and warning of military movements that might threaten your people." This last offer sent a ripple of reaction through the assembly. Kichi stood abruptly, addressing the council in rapid Apache, his gestures animated and clearly opposing. Nakohe responded in kind, his voice calm but firm. The exchange continued for several minutes, with other council members occasionally joining in. Sarah stood silently, understanding this was a critical moment. Finally, Taza raised his hand for silence. "Kichi says your offer is pleasing bait hiding a sharp hook," Taza explained. "He believes you seek knowledge of our movements to sell to soldiers. He reminds us of broken promises from white leaders." "Before?" Sarah nodded solemnly. "His concerns are reasonable based on history. I cannot erase past betrayals with mere words." She considered her next statement carefully. "But consider this. The Carson brothers raid both your people and mine, using our mutual distrust to shield themselves. While we remain enemies, such men prosper. Through cautious trade, we might begin to distinguish true enemies from potential allies. Taza translated her words, prompting thoughtful nods from several elders. Even Kichi seemed to consider this perspective, though his stance remained opposed. Unexpectedly, Nakohe stepped forward. "I have traveled with this woman," he said in Apache, then repeated in Spanish for Sarah's benefit. "She had opportunity to flee when we faced danger. Instead, she fought alongside me against Carson's men. She seeks trade, not conquest." His public support carried significant weight. A long discussion followed among the council members, sometimes heated, sometimes measured. Throughout, Sarah maintained a respectful silence, answering direct questions but never interrupting. Finally, Taza raised his hand. The council fell silent. "We have heard many voices," the elder announced. "Some counsel caution, others see opportunity." He fixed Sarah with a penetrating gaze. "The council is divided on whether to trust your words. Therefore, we propose a test." Sarah's heart quickened. "What kind of test?" "Return to your father's trading post," Taza said. "Bring proof of his honest intentions, samples of trade goods, and a written promise of fair dealing. Most importantly, bring evidence that you have not revealed our location to soldiers or settlers." Nakohe translated additional conditions. "You must return within 15 days. You will be blindfolded for part of the journey out, so you cannot lead others back. And," he hesitated, "and," Sarah prompted. "I am to accompany you," Nakohe finished, "to observe your people and judge if your words match your actions." Gasps and protests erupted from the gathered tribe. Nakohe, one of their most valued warriors, would be placing himself at tremendous risk by entering white settlement. "Silence," Taza commanded. "The decision is made. If the woman accepts these terms, we will consider trade. If not, she leaves with nothing." All eyes turned to Sarah. The terms were stringent, the dangers real for both her and Nakohe. Yet this was the opportunity she had risked everything to secure. "I accept," she said firmly. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow at dawn," Taza replied. "Prepare well. The path between worlds is never easy." The rising sun cast long shadows across the canyon as Sarah and Nakohe prepared for departure. The tribe had gathered, some to wish Nakohe safe journey, others to watch with barely concealed skepticism. Kichi stood apart, his disapproval evident in every line of his body. "He follows," Nakohe murmured to Sarah as they secured their provisions, "with 2 others to ensure we go where we claim." Sarah nodded slightly, understanding the implications. "Can you blame them?" "No." Nakohe adjusted the strap of his weapons. "I would do same." Taza approached, carrying a small clay container sealed with wax. He pressed it into Sarah's hands. "Medicine for your father," he explained. "Show good faith between peoples." Sarah accepted the gift with appropriate reverence. "Thank you, Elder. This means more than you know." As they prepared to leave, Nitika, the stern-faced woman who had taught Sarah food preparation, approached with a water skin decorated with intricate beadwork. "For journey," she said in halting Spanish, pointing to the canteen. "Both drink, both live." The shared canteen was a powerful symbol, a statement that their survival was now intertwined. Sarah thanked her sincerely, securing the gift to her. Belt where it hung between them, accessible to both. They departed with minimal ceremony, Nakohe leading the way with Sarah following on a horse provided by the tribe. Once beyond sight of the camp, he bound her eyes with a cloth. "Not personal," he explained. "Council's demand." "I understand," Sarah replied, surrendering herself to the disorienting experience of riding blindfolded through unfamiliar terrain. For hours, she focused on other senses, the rhythmic movement of the horse beneath her, the changing sounds of wind through different landscapes, the scent of sage giving way to pine and back again as they climbed and descended. Nakohe guided her mount with a lead rope, occasionally warning of low branches or steep descents. By midday, when he finally removed the blindfold, they had traveled far from the hidden camp. They paused near a small spring to rest the horses and share a meal of dried meat and pine nuts. "Your people are taking an enormous risk," Sarah observed as they ate. "Sending you with me." Nakohe nodded. "Taza believes seeing truth with own eyes better than hearing stories." He scanned the distant ridgelines. "Kichi thinks I am fool who will not return alive." "And what do you think?" Sarah asked quietly. Nakohe considered the question. "I think path forward cannot be found by standing still." He met her gaze directly. "But make no mistake, if your people threaten me, or if I see signs you plan to betray my tribe, I will disappear like morning mist. You will never find Apache camp again." "Fair enough," Sarah acknowledged. "I expect nothing less." They continued through the afternoon, making good progress until they reached a narrow ravine where recent rains had washed away the trail. As they searched for a crossing point, Sarah noticed Nakohe grow suddenly alert, his hand moving to his knife. "What is it?" she whispered. "Horse tracks," he replied tersely. "Fresh. Many horses." Sarah dismounted to examine the prints herself. "Soldiers?" "No." Nakohe pointed to distinctive markings in one print. "Carson's band, the horse with split shoe." They exchanged a knowing glance. The bandits were still hunting them. "We should find another route," Sarah suggested. Nakohe shook his head. "No. Time. 15 days to return is already a difficult journey." He studied the terrain. "We go at night, cross their path when they sleep." They made camp in a sheltered hollow, building no fire despite the evening chill. As darkness fell, they shared the canteen Nitika had given them, the water tasting of the sweet herbs Apache women added for long journeys. "Your rifle," Nakohe said suddenly. "You shoot well?" "Well enough," Sarah replied. "My father made sure of it." Nakohe nodded. "Good. Tonight may test your skill." Under starlight they proceeded cautiously through the ravine, leading their horses to minimize noise. The moon rose, casting silver light across the landscape and forcing them to seek deeper shadows. They had nearly cleared the dangerous section when a distant whinny froze them in place. Bandits' horses, perhaps a half-mile ahead. Their camp. Nakohe whispered, "We must go around." They veered eastward, picking their way slowly through boulder-strewn terrain. Sarah's heart pounded with each clink of stone under hoof, every rustle of fabric against leather. Suddenly, Nakohe raised his hand in warning. Ahead, a solitary figure moved between rocks, a sentry posted farther from camp than expected. They retreated silently, seeking another path, only to halt at the sound of voices behind them. "Patrol returning to camp." Nakohe breathed. "We are between them, trapped." Sarah met Nakohe's eyes in the darkness, reading the same grim calculation in his expression that she felt herself. They could not outrun mounted pursuers in this terrain, nor fight superior numbers with any hope of success. "There," Sarah pointed to a narrow crevice in the cliff face, "might be large enough to hide the horses." They led the animals into the shadowed opening, finding it extended deeper than expected, a shallow cave rather than mere alcove. As they pressed into its depths, Nakohe suddenly stiffened. "What is it?" Sarah whispered, unable to see in the absolute darkness. "Old signs," he replied softly. "Apache passed here before, many seasons ago." His fingers traced patterns on the stone wall that Sarah could not see. This was shelter place, safe path beyond. A shout from outside ended their whispered exchange. "The patrol had found their tracks. They know we're here," Sarah murmured. Nakohe's hand found her arm in the darkness. "Trust me," he said. "Follow exactly." He led her deeper into what she had thought was a dead end, feeling his way along the wall until they reached a narrow fissure. Cold air flowed from the opening, a sign it led somewhere beyond. "Old escape route," Nakohe explained. "Apache always prepare second path." They urged the reluctant horses through the tight passage, emerging eventually into a parallel ravine invisible from their original route. Behind them, they could hear the bandits searching the cave they had abandoned. They will find the passage. Eventually, Sarah said as they mounted quickly. Nakohe nodded grimly. Then we ride now. No rest until dawn. As they spurred their horses forward, Sarah realized their shared danger had shifted something fundamental between them. No longer was Nakohe merely escorting her under tribal orders. They were now truly allies against a common enemy, their survival bound together by forces beyond either's control. The shared canteen bounced against her hip as they rode, a constant reminder of Nitika's words, both drink, both live. In the race against Carson's vengeful pursuit, those words had never held more truth. 4 days of hard riding brought them within sight of settled territory. Atop a ridge overlooking the valley, where scattered homesteads marked the beginning of white settlement, Nakohe reined his horse to a halt. His expression remained impassive, but Sarah noticed how his hand tightened on his weapon. "We're still a half-day's ride from the trading post," she explained, pointing to a distant cluster of buildings. "That's Miller's Creek, just a few families and a smithy." Nakohe surveyed the landscape with a scout's calculating eye. Many eyes will see Apache rider. Sarah had anticipated this problem. From her pack, she withdrew a spare shirt, hat, and bandana. "These were my father's," she explained. "With your hair tied back and face partially covered, you might pass for Mexican or half-breed scout from a distance." Nakohe examined the offered disguise with obvious reluctance. To don the clothing of white men, even temporarily, clearly disturbed him, yet practicality won out. He slipped the shirt over his buckskin tunic and arranged the bandana to shadow his features. "Remember," Sarah cautioned, "keep your eyes down when others approach. Let me speak. Most folks around here know me and won't question my bringing back a guide." They descended into the valley as afternoon shadows lengthened. Sarah felt a curious reversal of their earlier dynamic. Now she was the one leading, while Nakohe followed, alert but silent, in an environment where he was the outsider. Miller's Creek appeared deserted as they approached, which struck Sarah as unusual for this time of day. Only when they reached the central crossroads did they discover why. Nearly everyone in the small settlement had gathered outside the smithy, where a man in a dusty military uniform was addressing the crowd. "That's Captain Thornton," Sarah whispered, guiding their horses to the edge of the gathering. "Army commander from Fort Gibson." They lingered at the back, close enough to hear the captain's speech about increased Apache raids and the Army's new aggressive patrol policy. Sarah felt Nakohe stiffen beside her as Thornton described the savages in terms that left no doubt about his contempt. 15 settlers killed this month alone," Thornton proclaimed. "The Army is authorized to pursue hostiles wherever they flee, with no more restraint. We'll teach them the cost of defying civilization." Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Sarah glanced at Nakohe, seeing the cold fury in his eyes despite his controlled expression. "Those deaths were Carson's work," he said under his breath. "Not Apache." "I know," Sarah replied quietly. "But Carson ensures the blame falls elsewhere." They slipped away before the gathering dispersed, continuing toward the trading post without stopping as originally planned. The captain's presence complicated everything. Dusk was falling when they finally crested the last rise, overlooking Blackwood trading post. Sarah felt a surge of emotion at the familiar sight, the weathered wooden buildings, the corral, the tall sycamore her father had preserved when clearing the land. Smoke rose from the chimney, a welcome sign that her father still lived. "Home," she said simply. Nakohe studied the isolated outpost. No neighbors close. Good. They approached cautiously, Sarah leading as they entered the yard. The door of the main building burst open before they'd fully dismounted. Sarah William Blackwood stood in the doorway, leaning heavily on a walking stick but very much alive. His weathered face reflected disbelief and joy. "My God, you're alive!" Sarah rushed to embrace her father, feeling how much weight he'd lost during her absence. "I made it, Pa, and I found what we needed." William's gaze shifted over her shoulder to where Nakohe stood beside the horses, still partially disguised, but unmistakably Apache to experienced eyes. "You brought one of them back with you?" His voice held no hostility, only astonishment. "This is Nakohe," Sarah said. "He saved my life, twice, and his people are willing to discuss trade if we prove ourselves trustworthy." William straightened as much as his weakened condition allowed. With deliberate dignity, he extended his hand in greeting. "Welcome to my home, Nakohe. Any man who protected my daughter is welcome at my table." Nakohe hesitated briefly before accepting the handshake. Studying William's face with the same intensity he applied to dangerous terrain. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, for he gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. "Come inside, both of you," William urged. "Sarah, you must be exhausted, and our guest needs food and rest as well." The interior of the trading post was warm and filled with familiar scents that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Wood smoke, coffee, the beeswax her father used on leather goods. Nakohe entered cautiously, his gaze sweeping every corner, noting exits and potential weapons with instinctive wariness. William busied himself preparing a simple meal while Sarah explained their journey. The attack by Carson's men, Nakohe's intervention, her days in the Apache camp, and the council's conditional offer of trade. She omitted the more dangerous details, conscious of her father's worried frown. "Carson's still operating?" William asked. "The army claims they've nearly eliminated bandit activity." "The army is wrong," Nakohe spoke for the first time since entering. "Carson attacks both sides, blames each for others' suffering." William nodded thoughtfully. "Divide and profit, oldest strategy there is." He set bowls of stew before them. "What does your elder, Taza, was it, require as proof of good faith?" Sarah produced her list. Trade samples, especially medicine, metal, tools and cloth, a written agreement with fair terms, and, she hesitated, assurance we haven't revealed their location to the military. "That last may be the hardest to prove," William mused. "Trust is easily broken, not easily rebuilt." As they ate, Nakohe gradually relaxed enough to answer William's respectful questions about Apache territories and customs. The old trader's genuine interest and knowledge of other tribal protocols clearly surprised him. "Your father speaks with straight tongue," Nakohe commented to Sarah later as William excused himself to rest. "Unusual for white man." "I told you he was different," Sarah replied. Night had fallen completely when a knock at the door startled them all. William, returning from his room, motioned for Nakohe to move out of sight. "Trading posts closed," he called. "It's Dr. Abernathy," came the response. "Brought that medicine you asked for, William." Sarah opened the door to admit the town physician, a greying man with kind eyes who had treated her family for years. His medical bag couldn't disguise the army pistol holstered at his hip, standard precaution for traveling these territories after dark. His eyes widened at the sight of Sarah. "My word, you've returned!" Then his gaze fell on Nakohe, who had not fully concealed himself. "And you're not alone." For a breathless moment, the doctor's discovery hung in the air like a lit fuse. Sarah moved instinctively between Nakohe and the doctor's holstered pistol, while William stepped forward with remarkable steadiness for his condition. "Thomas," William addressed the physician calmly, "I'd appreciate your discretion in this matter." Dr. Abernathy's expression shifted from shock to cautious curiosity. "You've brought an Apache into your home willingly, William." "This man saved my daughter's life," William replied, "and may help save all our livelihoods if you'll hear us out." The doctor hesitated, then slowly closed the door behind him. "I've known you 30 years, William. Never known you to act foolishly." He nodded toward Nakohe. But the captain's in town recruiting for a militia. If he learns about your guest, that's why no one else can know, Sarah interjected. At least not yet. Over coffee, which Nakohe cautiously tasted and then accepted, they explained the potential trading arrangement. Dr. Abernathy listened with increasing interest, particularly regarding the medicinal herbs unavailable in settled territories. The fever root alone would save lives, he acknowledged. Lost 3 children last winter who might have survived with proper medicine. Then you'll keep our secret, Sarah pressed. The doctor sighed heavily. For now. But William, you'll need to bring this before the town council eventually. A trading arrangement affects everyone. Once we've established trust with Tarza's people, William agreed. For now, we prepare the trade samples and draft the agreement. Dr. Abernathy departed with promises of silence, leaving them in fragile security. Over the next 2 days, William's condition improved with Nakohe's assistance. The Apache warrior prepared a tea using herbs he carried, explaining that his father had been a healer before becoming a war leader. The coughing sickness responds to this, he told Sarah as they gathered trade samples from the storeroom. Not cure, but eases breathing. William was indeed breathing easier, strong enough to help draft the trade agreement, a document that detailed fair exchange rates, neutral meeting locations, and explicit protections for both parties. Nakohe provided input that reflected Apache priorities, insisting on clauses prohibiting alcohol and guaranteeing territorial boundaries would be respected. On the 3rd morning, Sarah returned from checking their horses to find her father fully dressed for town. The council meets today, William explained. Time to present our proposal. Is that wise? Sarah glanced worriedly at Nakohe. With Captain Thornton still in the area? Thomas has arranged it, William replied. Says there's growing concern about winter supplies with the army changing routes. Perfect timing to propose an alternative. Sarah saw the determination in her father's eyes. His strength had returned enough to remind her of the formidable trader who had built this outpost from nothing. This was his element. Negotiation, persuasion, building bridges between disparate interests. Nakohe should remain hidden, she insisted. William shook his head. A trading partnership must be built on honesty. Nakohe comes with us, in disguise, but present. The small town hall was crowded when they arrived. Sarah recognized most faces, homesteaders, craftspeople, and shopkeepers who had dealt with. Blackwood trading post for years. Captain Thornton sat near the front, his uniform conspicuous among civilian clothes. Dr. Abernathy had arranged a seat for William near the aisle to accommodate his weakened condition. Sarah and Nakohe, still disguised as a Mexican guide, took places slightly behind him. Mayor Harkins called the meeting to order, addressing first the military's request for local militia volunteers. Captain Thornton stood to speak, his voice carrying the practiced authority of command. Gentlemen, the Apache menace has escalated beyond mere raiding. Intelligence suggests they're massing for coordinated attacks on settlements throughout the territory. Sarah felt Nakohe tense beside her at this blatant falsehood. The army is preparing a preemptive campaign, Thornton continued. With your help, we can eliminate the threat once and for all. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some enthusiastic, others uncertain. Homesteaders with families looked particularly troubled by talk of escalated conflict. Captain, Mayor Harkins interjected, while we appreciate the Army's protection, many here are concerned about the coming winter. With supply routes diverted, we face shortages of essentials. This opening allowed William to rise, leaning on his walking stick but speaking with clear authority. Friends and neighbors, I believe I can offer a solution to our supply concerns. For the next 20 minutes, William outlined the trading proposal, carefully framing it as a pragmatic business arrangement rather than a peace initiative. He emphasized the unique goods that would become available, the economic benefits to the settlement, and the controlled nature of the exchanges. The Apache have medicines we need, he concluded, gesturing toward Dr. Abernathy for support. We have tools and supplies they value. Commerce between peoples has always been the foundation of peace. Captain Thornton's face had darkened progressively throughout William's presentation. You're proposing to trade with hostiles who've murdered settlers across 3 territories, he interrupted. That borders on treason, Blackwood. I'm proposing to distinguish between hostile and non-hostile bands, William countered calmly. Just as we distinguish between law-abiding settlers and bandits like the Carson gang. A naive distinction, Thornton scoffed. They're all savages beneath a thin veneer of civilization. Sarah felt Nakohe's hand briefly touch her arm, a silent request for restraint as she opened her mouth to object. The debate intensified, with the town divided between those who saw economic opportunity in William's proposal and those who feared any engagement with the Apache. Throughout, Captain Thornton grew increasingly hostile, finally rising to deliver what seemed a prepared threat. Anyone trading with designated hostiles provides material support to enemies of the United States, he declared. The Army would view such actions accordingly. As the meeting adjourned with no firm decision, Sarah noticed a document protruding from Thornton's satchel, a map with markings that seemed familiar from her travels with Nakohe. While the captain was engaged in heated discussion with the mayor, she managed a glimpse of its contents. Her blood froze. The map showed planned Army movements into Apache territory, including areas suspiciously close to Tarza's hidden camp. Dates in the margin indicated operations would begin within days. Outside, as they prepared to return to the trading post, Sarah whispered her discovery to Nakohe and her father. They're planning a sweep through the exact region where your people are camped, she told Nakohe. Someone must have tracked us or found signs of the village. William's expression was grave. We need to see that map. If they're planning what I think they are, Tarza's people need warning, regardless of whether our trading arrangement proceeds. Tonight, Nakohe said simply, his eyes finding Thornton across the street. We take map tonight. The stakes had suddenly risen far beyond commerce. Now lives, perhaps an entire people's existence, hung in the balance. Darkness shrouded the settlement as Sarah and Nakohe crept toward the small inn where Captain Thornton had taken rooms. William remained at the trading post, reluctantly agreeing to provide a plausible alibi should questions arise. His final words to them had been grave. This crosses a line we can't uncross. Be certain. They were certain. The map Sarah had glimpsed showed planned troop movements that would encircle Tarza's band within days. Whether intentional or coincidental, the timing suggested someone had indeed tracked their journey. There, Sarah whispered, pointing to a ground-floor window where lamplight still glowed. The captain's quarters. He keeps military documents. In a leather satchel. Nakohe studied the building with a scout's precision. Guards! 2 soldiers at the front door, none at rear that I could see. They circled behind the inn where deliveries were made. A stack of empty crates provided a step up to the window, which was cracked open to admit the cool night air. Sarah kept watch while Nakohe investigated. Captain sleeps, he reported in a barely audible whisper. Satchel on table, Sarah nodded. I'll go. I know what we're looking for. Nakohe frowned. Too dangerous. I'm smaller and quieter, she reasoned. And if caught, they'll treat a white woman better than an Apache warrior. Before he could object further, Sarah hoisted herself onto the crates and slipped through the window with remarkable stealth. Inside, Captain Thornton's rhythmic breathing continued undisturbed from the bed across the room. The satchel lay on a small writing desk, partially open. Heart pounding, Sarah crept toward it. Each floorboard threatened to creak. Each rustle of her clothing sounded thunderous in her ears. She reached the desk and carefully extracted the map she'd seen earlier, along with several folded documents beneath it. As she turned to retreat, her elbow brushed a tin cup, sending it clattering to the floor. Thornton stirred, mumbling something unintelligible. Sarah froze, scarcely breathing until his snoring resumed. Then she moved swiftly to the window, passing the documents to Nakohe before climbing out herself. They were halfway across the yard when a shout came from the inn. Lights flared in windows. Thornton had awakened and discovered the theft. "Run!" Sarah hissed. They fled into the darkness, heading not for the trading post, too obvious a destination, but for the livery stable where their horses were kept. Behind them, the captain's bellowed orders and pounding boots suggested pursuit was organizing quickly. The startled stable boy barely had time to register their presence before Nakohe pressed a silver dollar into his hand. "You saw nothing," Sarah told him as they saddled their mounts with practiced haste. They rode hard, taking a circuitous route before circling back toward the trading post. Sarah clutched the stolen documents inside her jacket, their presence both damning and vital. When they finally reached the trading post, William was waiting anxiously by the corral. "You got it?" he asked as they dismounted. Sarah nodded, producing the map and papers. "And more. These are orders for the entire campaign." William spread the documents on a barrel under lantern light. His weathered finger traced the marked routes. "Just as we feared. They're planning to sweep through here and here, directly through Taza's territory." Nakohe studied the map intently, committing routes to memory. 3 days until they reach our camp," he concluded. "I must leave tonight. Warn my people." "Not alone," Sarah insisted. "Carson's men are still out there." A commotion from the road interrupted their counsel. Horses approaching at speed, lanterns visible in the darkness. "Thornton," William said grimly. "Get inside, both of you. Take the documents." Sarah hesitated. "Go!" he ordered. "I'll stall them." Inside, Sarah and Nakohe gathered only essential supplies while listening to the confrontation unfolding. Outside, William's voice carried clearly, playing the confused, ailing trader awakened by unexpected visitors. "Search where you will, Captain," they heard him say, "though I'd appreciate knowing what you're looking for in my home." Boots stomped onto the porch. Nakohe led Sarah to the root cellar, access through the storeroom, the same preparation for trouble that Apache wisdom had taught him. They had barely concealed themselves when soldiers entered, ransacking the trading post with methodical thoroughness. Through cracks in the floorboards, Sarah could see William seated calmly at his table, the picture of innocent bewilderment as Thornton interrogated him. "Your daughter and that guide," she brought back. "Where are they?" the captain demanded. Sarah mentioned riding to Miller's. "Greek," William replied evenly. "Something about supplies we need." "At this hour, do you take me for a fool, Blackwood?" The search continued until a soldier appeared with damning evidence, Nakohe's Apache medicine pouch, overlooked in their haste. "What's this?" Thornton demanded, dangling the item before William. Sarah felt Nakohe tense beside her. The pouch contained sacred items, meaningful beyond their physical value. William examined it with convincing puzzlement. "Looks Mexican to me. Sarah trades with border settlements sometimes." Thornton's patience evaporated. "Your daughter was seen with an Apache warrior, not some Mexican guide. You're harboring enemies, and now military documents are missing." He slammed his fist on the table. "Where are they?" "I don't know what you're talking about," William maintained. "But if Sarah's in trouble, I deserve to know why." Their standoff was interrupted by a soldier bursting through the door. "Captain! Riders spotted heading south. Matches the description." Thornton whirled toward the door. "Secure Blackwood and search every inch of this place. I want those documents recovered and the Apache captured." He fixed William with a cold stare. "Trading with hostiles is treasonous enough. Stealing military intelligence is hanging offense." After Thornton departed with most of his men, Sarah and Nakohe remained hidden, listening to the soldiers left behind, searching systematically through the trading post. William had been bound to a chair, maintaining his ignorance despite increasingly hostile questioning. "We can't leave him," Sarah whispered, clutching the stolen map. "We can't help him by being captured," Nakohe countered pragmatically. "Back exit, through storage cave." The trading post had been built incorporating a natural limestone cave as cool storage. William had once mentioned a narrow chimney shaft that vented the space, potentially large enough for a person to climb. As the soldiers' search moved upstairs, Sarah and Nakohe slipped from the cellar into the storage cave. The vertical shaft was tight but navigable, emerging behind the building near the woodpile. Under cover of darkness, they retrieved their horses from a secondary corral and prepared to flee. "The documents are what matters now," Sarah said, though her heart ached at leaving her father. "We have to warn your people and find evidence of who's really behind the raids." They rode into the night, pursued by soldiers, with Carson's bandits likely still hunting them as well. Sarah felt the weight of the military map against her chest. Its stolen intelligence, now their only hope of preventing a massacre, and perhaps clearing a path for the peace her father had sacrificed everything to build. Behind them, William Blackwood sat bound in his own home, paying the price for choosing humanity over hostility, cooperation over conquest. Sarah woke to the rhythmic creak of wagon wheels and the bite of rope around her wrists. Her head throbbed where she'd been struck during the ambush. Forcing her eyes open, she found herself lying in the back of a military supply wagon, canvas, sides blocking much of her view of the passing landscape. The previous night returned in fragments, riding hard through moonlit terrain, the sudden crack of rifle fire, Nakohe shouting for her to split off while he drew their pursuers away. Then soldiers appearing from nowhere, her horse shot from beneath her, a desperate struggle before darkness claimed her. Had Nakohe escaped? Did he still have the map? These questions burned, but Sarah forced herself to focus on her immediate situation. She was being transported somewhere, not back to the settlement, judging by the sun's position, to a military outpost then. And the torn fabric from her dress that she'd managed to snag on a bush during the struggle, had Nakohe found it. She'd left such markers deliberately, hoping he would track her if he could. The wagon jolted to a stop. Boots crunched on gravel, and the canvas flap lifted to reveal Captain Thornton's severe face. "Miss Blackwood," he said coldly, finally awake. Two soldiers hauled her from the wagon, her legs buckling momentarily before she steadied herself. Pride kept her spine straight, despite her bound hands and disheveled appearance. "Where's my father?" she demanded. "Being held pending charges of aiding hostiles," Thornton replied. "His fate largely depends on your cooperation." They had reached a small military outpost, little more than a wooden stockade surrounding a cluster of buildings. Sarah recognized it as Fort Wallace, an auxiliary position established to monitor the border territories. A dozen soldiers moved about their duties, eyeing her with curiosity as Thornton marched her toward the largest structure. Inside, the building functioned as both headquarters and officers' quarters. Sarah was brought to a sparsely furnished room, clearly serving as an improvised cell, its window boarded over, its door reinforced. "Your Apache friend abandoned you," Thornton remarked, studying her reaction. "Predictable. Their loyalty extends only to their own kind. Where are the documents?" "We took?" Sarah asked, ignoring his taunt. Thornton's expression tightened. "You still have them, or your accomplice does. They weren't on you when we found you." A flicker of relief passed through Sarah. She'd secured the map inside her jacket before the ambush. If it wasn't on her now, she must have lost it during the struggle, or more likely, Nakohe had retrieved it from her unconscious form before being forced to flee. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, adopting her father's strategy. "Of feigned ignorance. Treason during wartime," Thornton continued as if she hadn't spoken. "Aiding enemies of the United States. Theft of military intelligence." He listed the charges dispassionately. "Even a woman can hang for such crimes, Miss Blackwood." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "There is no war except the one you're trying to create. The Apache band we contacted has committed no raids, taken no scalps. All Apache are hostiles by military designation," Thornton snapped. "Your romantic notions about noble savages don't change that reality." A soldier appeared at the door. "Sir, Mr. Blackwood has arrived." Sarah's heart leapt. My father? But the man who entered, supported between two soldiers, was hardly recognizable. As the trader who had taught her strength and integrity, William Blackwood's face was bruised, his breathing labored. He had clearly been subjected to harsh questioning. "Pa!" Sarah moved toward him, but was restrained by a soldier. William's eyes found hers, conveying both love and warning. "Are you hurt?" he asked hoarsely. "I'm fine," she assured him, fighting back tears at his condition. Thornton observed their reunion with calculated interest. "Perhaps now you'll both be more forthcoming about the stolen documents and your Apache conspirator." William straightened as much as his injuries allowed. "My daughter and I are loyal citizens engaged in legitimate commerce. These accusations are groundless." "Commerce," Thornton scoffed, "with savages who murder settlers and ambush patrols." "The Carson gang is responsible for those attacks," Sarah interjected. "They deliberately create conflict between settlers and Apache to cover their operations." Thornton's expression shifted subtly, a flash of something that might have been concern, quickly masked by contempt. A convenient claim without evidence. The interrogation continued for hours. Father and daughter maintained their story despite increasingly explicit threats. As night fell, William was taken back to a separate holding area, leaving Sarah alone. With her fears and determination, through her boarded window, she could hear fragments of conversation from soldiers outside, enough to piece together disturbing information. The campaign against Tarza's band was proceeding. Troops were already moving into position for what they called a decisive action. More troubling was mention of civilian contractors working with the military, men who knew the territory intimately and could track Apache movements. The description of their leader made Sarah's blood run cold. "Carson's their guide?" a soldier asked incredulously. "Thought he was wanted. Captain made some deal," came the reply. "Carson finds the Apache camp. His past misunderstandings with the law get forgotten." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Carson wasn't just exploiting conflict between settlers and Apache, he was actively manufacturing it with Thornton's cooperation. The captain needed a victory against hostile natives to advance his career. Carson needed military backing to eliminate witnesses to his crimes and access new territories for plunder. Tarza's people were to be sacrificed for this unholy alliance. Morning brought renewed interrogation, but also an unexpected visitor. Dr. Abernathy arrived, ostensibly to check on the prisoner's health. "The town council sent me," he explained within earshot of guards, "to ensure proper treatment." While examining the cut on Sarah's forehead, he whispered, "Nakohe made contact. He has the documents safe. Kitchi and others are tracking Carson's." Amen. Hope surged through Sarah. "My father needs real medical attention," she said aloud, then added in a whisper, "Tell Nakohe 3 days. They plan to attack in 3 days." Dr. Abernathy nodded slightly, continuing his examination. When the guard stepped away momentarily, he pressed something into her hand, a small knife barely larger than a sewing tool but sharp. "Be ready," he murmured. "Events are moving quickly." After the doctor departed, Sarah concealed the knife. In a tear she created in her dress seam. Outside, she could hear increased activity, horses arriving, orders being shouted. Something was happening. Through her boarded window, she worked loose a small section of wood, creating a narrow line of sight. What she saw sent ice through her veins. Lucas Carson himself had ridden into the fort, accompanied by several of his men, thinly disguised as scouts. The bandit leader was conferring with Captain Thornton, both men examining what appeared to be a map. The alliance Sarah had suspected was now in plain view. Carson would lead Thornton's forces to Tarza's people, who would be blamed for raids they never committed, then slaughtered in the name of justice. Sarah worked frantically at her bindings with the small knife. Somehow she had to escape, to warn Nakohe, to save her father, to stop the bloodshed before it was too late. From his concealed position in the juniper thicket overlooking Fort Wallace, Nakohe watched the compound with unwavering attention. 3 days of patient observation had revealed the fort's routines, the changing of guards, the location where Sarah was held. 3 days of wrestling with divided loyalties and impossible choices. The stolen military map lay secured inside his tunic, its markings now committed to memory. It showed not just planned troop movements, but the locations of Apache camps that should have been unknown to white soldiers, including Taza's hidden valley. Such knowledge could only have come from someone who had tracked them or extracted information through violence. Kitchi appeared silently beside him, his face painted for war. He had followed Nakohe and Sarah from a distance, his suspicions about their journey confirmed when soldiers attacked. Now, surprisingly, he had become an ally in this crisis. Carson rides with soldiers, Kitchi reported in their language. 20 warriors wait in canyon, ready to strike when you give signal. Nakohe nodded. 20 Apache warriors against 30+. Soldiers and Carson's men, poor odds in open battle, but not impossible with surprise and careful planning. Yet such action would guarantee all-out war, precisely what Taza had sought to avoid for years. The woman, Kitchi continued, his tone neutral but questioning, she remains important to mission. The question cut to the heart of Nakohe's dilemma. By Apache reasoning, Sarah had served her purpose by helping secure the map. The strategic choice would be to leave her to her fate, returning immediately to warn the tribe. She saved my life, Nakohe replied simply. Twice. Kitchi's expression remained skeptical. One life against many. The tribe must be warned, and they will be. Nakohe assured him, but not by me alone. From his pack, Nakohe withdrew a cherished possession, the tribal necklace that marked him as a respected warrior of the Chiricahua. Turquoise and silver pieces his father had crafted, passed down when Nakohe completed his first vision quest. He had never been without it since that day. Take this to Taza, he instructed, placing it in Kitchi's hand. He will recognize my pledge. Tell him soldiers come in 3 days, led by Carson, who knows our secret paths. The tribe must move to winter grounds immediately. Kitchi stared at the necklace, understanding its significance. You choose the white woman over your own people. I choose honor, Nakohe corrected. She risked everything to warn us. Her father is prisoner because he sought peace with Apache. I will not abandon them to enemies who are enemies to both our peoples. After a moment of consideration, Kitchi secured the necklace. If you do not return, then remember that not. All white eyes are enemies, Nakohe finished. Some see with clear vision. As Kitchi departed to deliver the warning, Nakohe turned his attention back to the fort. The doctor had made contact as arranged, confirming Sarah was alive and sharing her message about the planned attack. Now, Nakohe faced the challenge of infiltrating a military outpost with minimal bloodshed. Opportunity came with dusk, a supply. Wagon approached the fort, driven by a trader Nakohe recognized from the town meeting, a man who had spoken favorably of William's trading proposal. Slipping down from his observation point, Nakohe intercepted the wagon just before it reached the fort's sightlines. The trader's initial fear gave way to cautious cooperation when Nakohe explained his purpose. Blackwood helped my family when no one else would, the man acknowledged. What do you need? Minutes later, the wagon approached the fort's gate with Nakohe concealed beneath canvas and supplies. Guards performed a cursory inspection before waving it through. Once inside the compound, Nakohe waited until the wagon was positioned near the storehouses before slipping away into evening shadows. Moving with the stealth that had made him the tribe's most valued scout, he worked his way toward the building, where Sarah was held. A change in routine played to his advantage. Most soldiers had gathered to hear orders for the coming campaign, leaving fewer guards at their posts. When he reached Sarah's window, he found the boards already partially loosened. From within, a soft scraping sound alerted her to his presence. Nakohe, her whisper carried equal measures of hope and disbelief. Be ready, he replied softly. Night comes. We leave then. My father, she insisted, we can't abandon him. I know where they hold him, but path is dangerous. Through the gap in the boards their eyes met, his determined, hers grateful, yet equally resolute. I thought you might have gone back to warn your people, she admitted. Kichi takes warning, Nakohe explained, with my necklace as proof. Sarah understood the significance immediately. You gave up your tribal symbol? Token of promise, he corrected, that I return. A guard's approaching footsteps forced Nakohe to withdraw temporarily. He circled the building, evaluating options. Direct confrontation would alert the entire fort. They needed distraction. Fortune favored them as twilight deepened. The arrival of Carson and his men had prompted impromptu celebrations among off-duty soldiers. Liquor flowed freely, discipline loosened. Even some guards abandoned their posts to glimpse the notorious frontiersman who would lead them to victory. Using a small flint, Nakohe set fire to a hay storage at the far end of the compound. As predicted, the blaze drew immediate attention, soldiers rushing to prevent it spreading to nearby structures. In the confusion, he returned to Sarah's window, now working openly to pry the boards free. Now, he called softly. Sarah squeezed through the opening, dropping lightly beside him. Her face was smudged with dirt, her dress torn, but her eyes shone with fierce determination. The guardhouse, she directed, pointing to a small structure near the main building. That's where they're keeping Pa. They moved through shadows, using the fire's distraction to approach the guardhouse undetected. Only a single guard remained at the door, his attention divided between his post and the commotion across the compound. Nakohe incapacitated him swiftly and silently, hand over mouth. To prevent alarm, Sarah retrieved the key from the unconscious guard's belt and unlocked the door. William Blackwood sat on a rough bench inside, wrists bound to a supporting post. His face showed relief, then concern at the sight of his rescuers. You shouldn't have come back, he said, as Sarah worked to free him. Too dangerous. Family does not abandon family, Nakohe stated simply, helping the weakened trader to his feet. William regarded the Apache warrior with new understanding. No, he agreed, softly. It doesn't. The fire had spread despite efforts to contain it, providing continued distraction. Using service passages Nakohe had memorized during his observations, they made their way toward the rear wall, where the trader waited with his wagon. They had nearly reached it when a voice rang out behind them. Going somewhere, Blackwood. They turned to find Captain Thornton leveling a pistol at them, his expression cold with triumph. I suspected something like this, the captain continued. Left just enough gaps in security to tempt you. His gaze shifted to Nakohe. Though I admit, I didn't expect you'd be fool enough to return for them. The distance to cover was too great. Any sudden move would give Thornton time to fire. Nakohe subtly shifted position, placing himself between the captain's weapon and his companions. You're working with Carson, Sarah accused. You know he's behind the raids, not the Apache. Carson is a useful tool, Thornton acknowledged, as your Apache friend will be. The military needs its victory, Miss Blackwood. The territory needs its villain. His smile was chilling. History is written by the victors, after all. Time seemed suspended in the tense tableau. Thornton with his pistol aimed, Nakohe poised for action, despite impossible odds, Sarah and William frozen in place. The fire's distant glow cast shifting shadows across their faces, the crackle of flames and shouting soldiers providing macabre background to their confrontation. You won't get away with this, Sarah said, her voice steady despite their precarious situation. People in town already suspect Carson's involvement in the raids. Thornton's laugh was short and cold. The word of a trader's daughter who conspired with Apache against a decorated army officer. I think history will record events as I describe them. Unless someone else is recording them too, came a new voice from the shadows. All eyes turned to see Dr. Abernathy step into view, accompanied by a distinguished older man in a colonel's uniform. Colonel Harrison, Thornton stammered immediately, lowering his weapon. "Sir, I was just apprehending escaped prisoners." "Save it, Captain," the colonel interrupted. "Dr. Abernathy has been keeping me informed of your activities." He gestured to several soldiers who appeared behind him. "Take Captain Thornton into custody." As Thornton was disarmed and restrained, his face contorted with rage. "This is absurd. I've been pursuing hostile Apache while collaborating with known criminals," Colonel Harrison finished. "The very bandits responsible for attacks you've attributed to peaceful tribes." The colonel turned to William, offering a respectful nod. "Mr. Blackwood, your reputation for fair dealing preceded you. When reports reached Fort Gibson about your arrest on suspicious charges, I decided to investigate personally." Sarah stepped forward, producing a folded paper from within her dress, Thornton's secret orders that she had managed to conceal. "These document the captain's arrangement with Carson. They detail payments and pardons in exchange for guiding troops to Apache camps." Colonel Harrison examined the document, his expression darkening. "Unauthorized operations, conspiracy with known felons. This goes beyond mere impropriety, Captain." A commotion from the main compound drew their attention. Soldiers were dragging a struggling man toward them, Lucas Carson himself, blood streaming. "From a head wound. Found him trying to flee during the fire, sir," reported a sergeant. "Had these on him." He handed the colonel a leather pouch containing gold coins and additional documents. "Payment for services rendered," the colonel noted grimly, examining the contents. "And maps marking previous raids that coincide perfectly with attacks blamed on Apache." Carson spat on the ground. "Thornton promised protection, military backing." "A promise he had no authority to make," Colonel Harrison replied coldly, "and one that will see you both facing military justice." As the gravity of his situation became clear, Thornton made a desperate lunge toward Nakohe. "It's still his word against mine. Who'll believe an Apache savage over an army officer?" Nakohe sidestepped the attack with fluid grace, allowing Thornton's momentum to carry him stumbling forward. The captain recovered quickly, drawing a hidden knife and charging again. What followed happened almost too quickly to follow. Nakohe deflected the knife thrust, but Thornton's military training made him a formidable opponent even disarmed. They grappled briefly before Thornton broke free, grabbing Sarah as a shield with his blade at her throat. "Nobody moves," he shouted. "I'm leaving this fort and she's coming with me." William stepped forward despite his weakened condition. "Take me instead, let my daughter go." "Stay back, old man," Thornton warned, backing toward the gate. "Anyone follows, she dies first." In the chaos of shouted orders and movement, no one noticed Nakohe had disappeared from view. No one except Sarah, who had seen enough of Apache hunting techniques to recognize the distraction tactic. She deliberately stumbled, forcing Thornton to adjust his grip. That momentary shift was all Nakohe needed. Dropping silently from the low roof above, he struck with precision, knocking the knife away and pulling Sarah clear in a single fluid motion. Soldiers swarmed forward, subduing Thornton before he could recover. "Are you hurt?" Nakohe asked Sarah quietly, his hands still steadying her shoulders. "No," she assured him, then impulsively embraced him, a gesture that visibly startled the warrior before he cautiously returned it. Colonel Harrison observed this interaction with interest before addressing the gathered soldiers. "Secure the prisoners. I want statements from everyone involved, and prepare dispatch riders for Fort Gibson." As order was gradually restored, the colonel invited William, Sarah, and, most surprisingly, Nakohe to the headquarters building to provide formal statements. There, in the very room where Thornton had planned his campaign against the Apache, they documented the true sequence of events. "This evidence will prevent military action against peaceful tribes," the colonel assured them, "but the larger question of territorial relations remains unresolved." William, though weakened by his ordeal, spoke with the quiet authority that had earned him respect across the frontier. "Perhaps this unfortunate business offers an opportunity, Colonel, a chance to distinguish between peaceful bands interested in coexistence and those truly hostile." You still believe trade is possible? The colonel asked skeptically. I've seen it work elsewhere, William replied. The Apache leader Taza is a man of wisdom and foresight. He authorized his warrior to explore peaceful commerce despite generations of bloodshed. The colonel turned to Nakohe. Is this true? Your chief would consider formal trading relations? Nakohe met his gaze directly. Taza seeks path that allows Apache to survive changing times, trade better than war, but trust must be earned. Indeed it must, the colonel agreed, on both sides. As dawn approached, an extraordinary scene unfolded at Fort Wallace. Colonel Harrison dispatched riders carrying not orders for attack, but invitations for parley. Nakohe provided directions to neutral meeting grounds where Taza might safely confer with military representatives. The Apache will be suspicious, Nakohe cautioned. They must see proof of Carson's capture and Thornton's disgrace. They'll have it, the colonel assured him, along with my personal guarantee of safe conduct. As arrangements proceeded, Sarah joined Nakohe at the fort's perimeter, where he stood watching the eastern horizon. Will they come? She asked. After everything that's happened? Kichi will have reached them by now, Nakohe replied. Taza will listen, but many will oppose meeting with soldiers. And you? Sarah asked carefully. Where will you be? Nakohe touched the empty space at his neck where his tribal necklace had hung. I must return to my people, explain what happened, speak for this new path. The weight of his words hung between them. Acknowledgement of separate worlds despite their shared journey. Sarah nodded, understanding but unable to hide her disappointment. Then, I hope we meet again, Nakohe, perhaps at a trading post somewhere between our peoples. As the first light of dawn broke across the eastern plains, Nakohe made a decision. From inside his tunic, he withdrew a small object, a simple bracelet woven from leather and threads taken from Sarah's torn dress, combined with beads from his own belongings. Until then, he said, placing it in her palm, a reminder that different paths sometimes join. 6 months later, Blackwood Trading Post bustled with activity that would have seemed impossible during those desperate days when Sarah had first ventured into Apache territory. The main building had been expanded, a covered area added where traders of different backgrounds could meet in neutral territory. William Blackwood, his health significantly improved, supervised exchanges from his chair on the porch, his experienced eye ensuring fairness for all parties. Sarah moved among the traders, her confidence and authority evident in every interaction. She wore the woven bracelet Nakohe had given her, now supplemented with small silver beads, a detail noticed by the Apache traders who occasionally nodded in recognition. Another successful day, Dr. Abernathy commented, joining William on the porch. Your trading post has become quite the cultural crossroads. William smiled, watching his daughter negotiate with a mixed group of settlers and Apache. Sarah's the one who made it happen. I just provided the foundation. The path to this moment had not been easy. After Colonel Harrison's intervention, a tentative meeting had been arranged between military representatives and Taza's band. Nakohe had served as interpreter, his credibility with both sides proving invaluable. The resulting agreement was limited, restricted trading rights, and designated neutral territories, but it was a beginning. Carson and Thornton had faced military justice, their confessions revealing the extent of their conspiracy to profit from conflict between settlers and Apache. More importantly, their exposure had created space for moderate voices on both sides to be heard. Still no permanent peace, William acknowledged to the doctor, but commerce builds connections that politics cannot. The trading post now hosted a carefully scheduled rotation of Apache and settler trading days, with Blackwood serving as intermediaries. Trusted by both sides, the medicines Taza had provided had indeed helped William's condition, while metal tools and cloth from the settlement improved conditions for the Apache during harsh seasons. Sarah concluded her negotiations and approached her father with a ledger. "The Apache brought twice the obsidian this month," she reported, "and their healing herbs are in demand all the way to Tucson now." "And Nakohe?" William asked gently. "Any word?" Sarah's expression softened. "His messenger came yesterday. The northern bands are considering joining the trading agreement. He's been speaking on our behalf. Nakohe had returned to his people as promised, but his experiences had transformed his role within the tribe. No longer simply a scout and warrior, he had become Taza's representative to other Apache bands and to the settlement, bridging worlds as few could. His visits to the trading post were infrequent but significant, each time bringing new opportunities for cooperation and deeper understanding between cultures. Though neither he nor Sarah spoke openly of personal feelings, the connection between them was evident to all who observed their interactions. As afternoon shadows lengthened, a rider appeared on the distant ridge, a solitary figure easily recognizable by his posture and the eagle feather in his headband. "Nakohe," Sarah said, unable to keep a smile from her face. She walked to meet him at the edge of the trading post grounds, aware of curious glances from both settlers and Apache traders. Their relationship existed in an undefined space, neither fully accepted nor explicitly forbidden by either culture. "The northern bands agreed," Nakohe announced without preamble as he dismounted. "They send representatives next moon." "That's wonderful news," Sarah replied. "My father will be pleased." They stood in momentary silence, the formality of their public roles at odds with the journey they had shared. "Walk with me," Sarah finally asked, gesturing toward the ridge overlooking the trading post. Together they climbed the gentle slope, reaching the vantage point as the setting sun bathed the landscape in golden light. Below them, Apache and settler traders concluded their business for the day, moving in separate but peaceful patterns. "Sometimes I still can't believe we've come this far," Sarah admitted, gazing at the scene. "Far, but journey not complete," Nakohe observed. "Some still choose conflict." He was right. Not all settlers accepted trading with Apache, and not all Apache bands recognized Taza's authority to negotiate. Kitchi and others maintained a wary distance, participating in trade but remaining skeptical of permanent peace. Just the previous month, a group of renegade settlers had attempted to raid an Apache hunting party, nearly unraveling months of careful diplomacy. Only swift intervention by Colonel Harrison had prevented the situation from escalating. "The path is fragile," Sarah acknowledged, "but it exists where none did before." Nakohe nodded, his gaze moving to the distant mountains where his people's main camp was currently located. "Taza says building trust like building fire in wet wood takes time, patience, and constant tending," Sarah added. Their hands rested side by side on a sun-warmed boulder, nearly touching but not quite, a metaphor for their relationship that neither missed. Nakohe wore his tribal necklace again, restored by Kitchi upon his return. Sarah's bracelet, with its combined materials from both cultures, caught the fading light. "Taza grows old," Nakohe said quietly. "Soon council will choose new leader." The implication hung between them. Leadership transitions could threaten everything they had built. "And your voice in council?" Sarah asked carefully. "Stronger now. Many listen." His gaze met hers directly. "Some paths remain open that once seemed closed." The simple statement contained layers of meaning that Sarah understood perfectly. Whatever the future held, they had created possibilities that neither could have imagined when their journey began. As darkness fell, fires were lit at the trading post below, separate groups but sharing the same light. William could be seen talking with Apache elders, the barriers of language less important than the universal language of fair exchange. "Your father's dream," Nakohe observed. "It lives." "Our dream now," Sarah corrected gently. Nakohe's hand moved slightly, his fingers brushing against hers, a subtle gesture but profound in its meaning. Neither pulled away. On the horizon, the evening star appeared, equally visible to all peoples regardless of language, culture, or history. Sarah and Nakohe watched it in companionable silence, standing at the borderland between separate worlds that through their efforts had begun the long journey toward understanding. The woven bracelet and tribal necklace caught the last light of day, symbols of a bridge built by two people who had dared to see beyond generations of conflict to the possibility of something better. Different paths had indeed joined, creating a new trail for others to follow.